Today's guest has dedicated his life to social justice and has worked to develop leaders and build up communities all over the country. Stay with us for this episode of Lakeshore Focus.
The Indiana University Northwest School of Business and Economics is the only public institution in the region to hold AACSB International accreditation. The program provides undergraduate business education with a balanced curricula based in leadership, teamwork, and technology. IUN serves both traditional and non-traditional commuter students in a diverse urban environment. Learn more at iun.edu/business.
Welcome again to Lakeshore Focus, a weekly show highlighting the key issues, important events, and interesting people in our region. I'm Keith Kirkpatrick. Our guest today has spent his life developing leaders, assisting with grassroots political campaigns, and working to build up our country and region's low-income communities. Please welcome Rudy Lopez, the Executive Director of Interfaith Worker Justice. Man, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you.
So you're kind of back in Chicago now working.
Yeah, I'm back in the area. In many ways I never left, although I did spend a lot of time here. Spending a lot of time in Washington and then flying to different parts of the country. So I've been really blessed to have met a lot of great people. I've had a lot of wonderful experiences.
So you're kind of our East Chicago boy who's done well, would you say?
There's a lot of people that I run into, actually all over the country, that you don't realize the depth of talent that places like East Chicago and the region produces. I mean, I could be in places that you wouldn't think of, and lo and behold, there's somebody from the region, and we just end up talking, and so it's good to see.
Well, I'm glad to hear that because you're all over the place. You worked a lot in California. You were in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. You've been a lot of time in D.C. Yeah. So, can you kind of give a thumbnail so our viewers have a feeling for the kind of things you've been involved in?
Sure, no, I'd be happy to. I mean, the past 19 years of my life has been dedicated to social justice, and there's a lot of different versions of what that can mean. But for me, it means organizing in communities. So what do I mean by organizing? Essentially, what I do is connect with people who share a similar sense of their values, of the way they want to see the world, that want to make a difference, that want to make a change. And all I do is give them some support in doing that, maybe provide some tools and some resources, and we help to create a plan.
I think there's a little more to it than
that's
all I do is just simply hand them these little few tools. I think one of the reasons I wanted you on the show, Rudy, is I think you're a person who has a huge impact on people.
Thank you.
You inspire people, you motivate people, and you have touched so many people in different communities. Can you give kind of an example of somebody that if you look back, you said, here's somebody I kind of helped them get going and they've really done well,
Wow, that's quite a question. I've been really blessed to be able to have been in places where, sometimes the most impactful impact is with people that sometimes you don't even realize at the time that you've done that. I used to do a lot of training and still do some, but a good portion of my job in the past had been going all over the country and training people on civic engagement, how to run for public office, and being organizers. And I still run into people who say, I was at your training, and because of what you said or because of the time you spent with me, I did something different, or I changed my job, or it gave me the confidence I needed. So it's those kinds of things that really, touch you, because at the time you don't realize that maybe the littlest thing that you did really impacted somebody.
Can you talk about a couple of those specifically? I mean, again, I know for you, definition of success is if you get somebody to just even organize something that's pretty effective is a success. So I'm not necessarily looking for the big name or anything, but just where you felt like you look back and it's one of those stories you say, man, I just felt good, and this person really did something.
Well, there's a friend of mine named Ray Calderon, who's an organizer in Chicago, and he actually created his own organization, and he's a very skilled organizer. Well, when I first got started in organizing a long time ago, I organized in the South Side neighborhoods of the city of Chicago. And it was a very challenging time for me because I was learning a new way of organizing and at the same time finding my own sort of voice in this world and in movement of organizing and social justice. And there was a lot of challenges. And I did a lot of journaling, writing things down. And I actually challenged some of the way in which things were being done. And I really didn't know Ray back then, but he came in soon after I had left. And he came up to me years later and says, you know, I went down into the archives or the files, and I picked up one of the reports you wrote, and your critique on the way in which we organize, and this should be different. And that inspired me to make a different change. And said, yeah, you know, he's right. We need to do something different. And from that, he went and started his own organization and is somebody who's making a difference for a lot of people himself today.
Isn't that interesting? You wouldn't think about something as simple as a report I wrote on just kind of an analytical piece that somebody would read that and go,
Yeah.
this makes a lot of sense, and it kind of inspires me to want to do something.
I had forgotten all about it. I actually hadn't remembered. And I was like, yeah, I think I remember writing something like that, but he certainly did.
You may have to go back and pull it out of the archives or something. So and see, you'll probably say, this doesn't sound very good, but it inspired him, right?
That's right.
So you do a lot, you try to get people to run for office too, right?
Well, that used to be a part of my
Okay.
job. In my new role, it's quite different. But a good portion of my work had been in civic engagement. So certainly having people run for office and training them to do so, but more than that, the real heart of what I was doing is getting people to understand that our electoral process, the political process, is something only works if everyday people get involved. If people like you and me want to be able to see a change, well, we can't just do it ourselves. We need to be able to work with others. And having people who are frustrated, which I can relate to, especially being from the region, frustrated with politics, but nothing changes if you don't do something about it. And that's a big part of what your show is about, right? Urging people to make a difference. So when I saw how people who really took it to heart and learned the skills and spent the time and worked really hard, how they were able to make a difference, it just inspired me to be able to do more and more of it. So I've been really blessed to manage campaigns all over the country. I managed a U.S. Senate campaign in Rhode Island, and I've done a lot of national presidential campaigns as well. So it's something that was a big part of my life and still something I believe in, civic engagement, making a difference, but not so much what I do day to day anymore.
Where did you learn to be such a good communicator?
No,
Where'd that come from?
I got some practice of working with you back in the days.
I wasn't looking for that, because we only worked for a short period of time. But
Sure.
was that something natural for you when you were younger?
Yeah.
Or did you have to work at kind of honing that skill?
Well, you know, I tell you what, practice has a lot to do with it. And again, I've been blessed to be in situations where I didn't have much choice. Like you had to do it. But I really don't see myself as like a spokesperson for other people. I see myself as somebody who's trying to lift up the values that people and I share together and give people a little bit of a window into somebody they may not have met personally, but they can get a sense of that person's story because of the experience maybe I've had with them or communities like theirs. So being able to have gone around the country and met so many fascinating people, it's given me the ability to relate to them and then want to communicate that story. And it's really about that desire to do that, me being able to really feel that that story is important to be shared and that that point of view is important too. And this is the thing, Keith, it's not very different from my own desire, my own values. So when those things come together, it's really powerful. And I find that when we share that with other people, they find connections to it too.
Who's had a big impact on you in your career? I mean, you know, somebody that just, man, they said something or did something that just really...
You know, there's been so many. Again, I've been really blessed to be able to have met people like Cesar Chavez, you know, the great labor leader who when I was at Indiana University, we worked really hard and convinced the university to bring him. And he came a year before his death, before he passed. And, you know, being able just to greet him. I remember when he came to the door, And they said, he's here. And, this is someone you read about in history books. And you're expecting this giant of a man to come through the door. And I remember I ran to the door, and I just saw his silhouette. And he came through. There was this sunlight beaming from behind him. And he walks in, and then he comes into the light. And it's this little guy. And I'm like, is that you? I'm thinking to myself. And he came to me, Keith, and he grabbed my hand. He says, "Are you Rudy?" I'm like, "Yes." And he held my hand and he says, "Thank you for bringing me here." And the place was packed with people, but in that moment, the way he looked at me, he looked into me, and it was just me and him. And for somebody who had sat with presidents and who had been all over the world, and to be able to give me that attention, that was very humbling. And it taught me a great deal, that no matter where you get to or what you do, you always need to have time for people, no matter who they are. And that stayed with me since then.
Well, Chavez is such a legend.
Yeah.
So I can see the inspiration and the excitement of that. You ever think that he maybe planned on walking through that with that light behind him? It was kind of
I never really thought about it, but yeah, maybe.
it
He
made
was
an impression
strategic
on you, right?
Yeah, it sure did. And I've been able to sit down with our sitting president, Barack Obama, several times, and actually did a training for him, and some people that he, some youth that he wanted to get to think about running for office. And I've met people who have just been fantastic leaders. But at the same time, quite honestly, a lot of what's really touched me is just people I meet in everyday towns and cities throughout the country. People who maybe I meet just for a moment. But that's the beauty in those kinds of experiences.
Well, you genuinely care about people. That's huge.
Well, and I do. I think it's something, certainly my parents had a big influence in being able to make sure that you knew that we're bound to one another. One of the things that's been a really important part of my life, and still is very much, is a reason why I'm doing the job that I'm doing now, is my faith. I grew up here in the harbor in East Chicago, Indiana, and I still live there. And that's by choice. I chose to do that because it's my home. And I go to Our Lady of Guadalupe Parish, and I really believe that we're called. Each one of us is called and has our own vocation, if you will. We're called to be able to live out our purpose. Unfortunately, many of us never find that purpose because we're not seeking it out intentionally. We get caught up with the day-to-day things about paying bills and really the distractions of the world around us. But when we take time to think about who we are and what God has in store for us, it's very powerful, and also something that's very attractive to other people.
What do you feel like your calling and your purpose is?
Well, I like to think that I'm, if not doing it right now, getting real close to it. And one of the reasons why I left that political world behind, not totally, but doing the day-to-day. So now, as the Executive Director for Interfaith Worker Justice, I'm seeking this intersection between social justice and faith. Something that's not just a veneer of faith, but really rooted. Something that informs our work, that every day I get up, I see that there's a divine touch on what's happening out there. And every day we work with people who share values and thinking about, we live in a country that's so rich and abundant. That's something that people had a hand in making, and not just the CEOs of organizations or these big companies, but the everyday worker. And my dad, working in the mill here for almost 40 years of his life, taught me a lot of the value of hard work and appreciating hard work, no matter whether you are the CEO or a doctor or a lawyer, or whether or not you're picking fruits and vegetables and making somebody's bed. There's value in that, and good work should always be valued.
It's interesting, several times during this conversation you brought up about looking for that commonality, that shared values that people have, which is so refreshing to hear in this day of everybody seems to be on the opposite side of everything, fighting. How do you kind of contend with that? Because that is a very strong piece of our culture today, is being on opposite sides and really not seeing the commonality at all. How do you approach a group who really are like that? Just polar opposites, or really live in that polar world.
Well, I've worked in Washington, D.C. for a good amount of time now, so I know what you mean by that. I think too often we engage people in trying to win an argument instead of trying to come to some understanding. And a lot of times that happens because we get so entrenched in our point of view and we get stuck in our heads. But the beauty of being able to go beyond just the facts or your particular point of view is when you connect it with your heart and your gut and you extend that to somebody else and you try to come to some common ground. That's when you're able to really make a connection. But too often in the polarized world we live in, we're trying to just win the day instead of really think about what is it that we're building together. Because quite honestly, I mean, we are all in this together. And it's not just enough for a few of us to be making it when the rest of us are struggling and having a challenge.
That's really an interesting analysis of moving from what's in the head, which is often coming out of the mouth, to what's really behind it in the heart and in the soul of a person. But what happens when you find that that is heavily driven by fear?
Yeah.
That, I mean, that the person is just really scared, and that's where the place they're coming from.
So, and those are real feelings, and these are things that have some, can be very powerful, but there's other values and emotions that are even more powerful, and that's being able to see the beauty of each person, look at the love that everybody has within themselves. And, I'm also not naive. We're also not just going to always have the right magical conversation and you're going to be able to win someone over. That's why I also believe in building power. And for everyday folks to be able to find their own voice, to be able to find power in their own experience. And sometimes when push comes to shove and you're not able to find common ground, power needs to be contested for.
But how do you move past, and I get it, you try to find that love component or that positive component.
That connection,
But you got people who are just angry and scared.
Well, immigration reform is a good example
right.
of that.
How do you move, because you got to deal with that anger and that fear some way, because that's where they're coming from at the moment.
Well, I've worked for many years on immigration reform, but particularly the last 2 years. And, I even camped out in front of the U.S. Capitol for 22 days, fasting, to be able to bring attention to this important issue that's affecting our country. And I had a lot of people send me hate mail and emails and, harass me around this. And, when I go in talk shows, sometimes they're not always as good to talk to as you are.
So I should attack more.
No, please. This is definitely much better. But fear comes from where? It comes from a lack of understanding. It comes from a lack of their own security. And I find that many times when you're able to give people a more personal experience and find ways which we're reaching some commonality. Maybe it's around a particular experience we both shared or a particular emotion that we both shared. But I think being able to go to them and at least in my experience, I found that if I push back when someone is pushing towards me, then they're going to dig in their heels. But if I'm able to be able to relax a little bit, pay attention, listen to them, give them that respect, it's really disarming for folks. And we're able, in that moment, to find a breath. And sometimes that's all it takes. Now, there are other times where that's not enough. And when I talked about building power, that's something we take seriously. And there's people who are greedy in this country. There's people who don't want to have everybody progress together. And that's something that we got to continuously move towards. And sometimes it's just really not easy. And that's some of the toughest parts of what I have to do in the job that I have.
Where did all this wisdom come from you that just kind of flows forth from your mouth?
I appreciate that.
You really have a great grasp of a lot of things. Where did that come from, and how long has that been there?
Well, again, I've had amazing parents and then some wonderful mentors, people who've been doing this work for a long time, who've taken time to invest in me, and also, again, people who, the barber that I have, that I would go to, and he would just sit down and tell me about his life, whether it's the person where I go get my vegetables from, or someone that I meet on a plane. I think just being open to having these experiences and these nuggets of wisdom. And then, it's what you do with them, because we all get them. They're all around us. We all are blessed with people who come into our lives and be able to have these experiences that can be very rich. What I do is I think about them and I reflect on them, and I'm very grateful for them, so I give gratitude. But then I also try to apply what I learned. Okay, if this is something like, even in this show, what gem did I get from this experience? And what is it that I can take from it, not just to make me better, although that's okay, but what can I do that's going to help somebody else maybe look at things a little bit differently? Maybe have somebody else be able to look at their connection to somebody else a little bit differently as well. So again, I think whatever I am today, it's because a product of where I'm from and the people that I've been connected to.
You know, it's interesting, as I listen to you, you talk a lot about being mentored and people who've taught you and the people you've
really important.
Listened to. I know that you're that to a lot of other people, and it probably has shifted over the years to where you're probably more of a giver than a taker. I mean, when we're younger, we tend to absorb a lot, but you probably now are giving a lot. Mm-hmm. Do you see that in yourself, that people come to you now and kind of say, be my mentor, Rudy?
Yeah.
Help me, guide me, the same way people have done that for you?
Yeah, no, it certainly happens. And it's important that there's a good balance. I mean, I like to think that the mentors I've had over the years have also gotten something from the relationship. And I've been intentional about that because there should be this sort of, not that it should be transactional, but there should be a quid pro quo where we're really enriching each other's lives. But yeah, I've had a lot of people who have come up to me and have asked me for advice. And there's some times where I just tell them, look, I'm not too good at knowing about that. You should talk to somebody else. Because just because you might have expertise in one area doesn't mean you're an expert overall. So a big part of leadership, if you want to call it that, is knowing what you don't know and having enough humility to be able to say, I'm probably not the best person for that. But also having confidence that when you do know something, not to be afraid to use it.
It sounds like you still have a lot of pride in being from this region.
Oh, yeah.
And why is that still so important to you in the last minute here? Why is that still so important to you?
Well, it's it's who I am. It's part of where I come from. I come from, I was born here, but I have immigrant mother. And again, my dad was a farm worker till he was 13, then worked in the mills. Those are things that just don't go away. They're ingrained in you. And, the experiences I had growing up in Chicago, being able to live my life in the region. There's a reason I still live here. Now, maybe someday I might move away, but that doesn't mean that the region doesn't come with me.
Well, I appreciate everything you do, and it sounds like you got a great new opportunity. You've only been there a couple of months, but we're going to be watching our boy from East Chicago who's going to continue to do well in Chicago. So thank you so much for being here on the show. We really appreciate it.
That was my pleasure, Keith. Thank you.
Good to see you again.
Same here, brother. Thank you.
Right. By now, you may have seen one or two of our series on extraordinary people who have made a positive difference. You are reminded that I end each show with a phrase, make a positive difference in our world today. Today, you met our third guest and heard how he has excelled beyond the typical person. I continue to hope for our interviews to inspire and motivate you to be a person who will take on a greater challenge, do something that you might not ordinarily do, or engage in a way that stretches you. You are probably becoming quite familiar with some of the items hanging on my office wall. Another favorite is a ceramic square that says, life is all about how you handle Plan B. Maybe it's time for you to move to Plan B. What are you doing now or in the past that may not be working or is getting a little worn? Modify, switch, or try a new approach. That change may be the difference you need to make a difference. Thanks for watching Lakeshore Focus. During March, I have been making an appeal for you to send an email. Not the normal one on what you thought of the show. We want something different. We would like you to become a part of a viewer group receiving regular emails from us about shows, asking for your ideas, and seeking feedback on topics and issues. One of your ideas may become a show. Please email today to focus@lakeshorepublicmedia.org. Write this address down now so you won't forget. Remember, you will become a part of a special group of viewers, and your input will be valuable to enriching this show. You can also visit our website where you can enjoy past Lakeshore Focus episodes. Join us next week for another Lakeshore Focus. Until then, I'm Keith Kirkpatrick, reminding you again to make a positive difference in our world today.
The Indiana University Northwest School of Business and Economics is the only public institution in the region to hold AACSB International accreditation. The program provides undergraduate business education with a balanced curricula based in leadership, teamwork, and technology. IUN serves both traditional and non-traditional commuter students in a diverse urban environment. Learn more at iun.edu/business.